Good morning, I'm Maiki Oreta, and you're watching Business 360, where we break down the numbers, connect the dots, and give you the developments and the insights you need to navigate, adapt, and lead. Let's dive right in. Philippine banks' bad loans fall to a 3-month low, signaling steady repayment despite global economic headwinds. Social Security system slams the door on online gambling investments as calls grow for a nationwide ban on government involvement. Congress launches a probe into billion-peso flood control projects targeting contractors flagged by President Marcos for possible anomalies. Let's check on how global markets performed overnight. U.S. stocks closed higher after July inflation came in largely as expected, boosting hopes for a Federal Reserve rate cut next month. The Labor Department reported the Consumer Price Index rose 0.2% in July, with annual inflation slightly below forecast. The data prompted U.S. President Donald Trump to renew his calls for lower interest rates.
I think there's some relief in the stock markets that the July print for CPI wasn't something like 4 or 5. We have recent memory just a few years ago of being surprised by a very large margin on these inflation figures. So I think that's still in the memory. And so when your upside is about 30 basis points or, headline being mostly in line with expectations, that's a big win as far as the stock market is concerned.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average jumped 1.1%, the S&P 500 up by 1.1% as well, and the Nasdaq higher by 1.4%. Markets in Europe ended mixed. London's FTSE higher by 0.2%. Germany's DAX went the other way, down by 0.2%, and France's CAC 40 higher by 0.7%. Here at home, the country's banking sector is showing signs of resilience, with the non-performing loan ratio falling to a 3-month low of 3.34% in June. Bangko Sentral data shows that's down from 3.38% in May and 3.51% a year ago. And that's the lowest level since 3.3% in March. Loans are considered non-performing if they're unpaid for at least 90 days, making them high risk with a low likelihood of repayment. John Paulo Rivera, Senior Research Fellow at the Philippine Institute for Development Studies, says that the slight improvement may point to steady borrower repayment capacity, helped by low inflation, stable employment, and strong domestic demand. The uptick is good news for banks and investors, but analysts warn that global economic headwinds could still put pressure on credit quality later this year. A bill that could rewrite the rules for the Philippines' data industry is now on the president's desk, and telco giants are pushing back. PLDT and Globe are urging President Marcos to reconsider the Konektadong Pinoy bill, warning of potential constitutional issues and cybersecurity risks. They argue that the measure could create a regulatory imbalance, giving generous incentives to new data providers while leaving incumbents with little protection. PLDT says that the bill could force operators to open their network assets without strong enough cybersecurity safeguards, while Globe is calling for changes to ensure fair competition and industry stability. With just 12 days left to decide, President Marcos faces a choice that could reshape the country's digital infrastructure, competition landscape, and investment climate for years to come. And from tech policy to investment ethics, the Social Security System, or SSS, is drawing a line. No shares, no plans, and no interest in online gambling firms. The pension fund backs the Finance Department's call for a ban on government investments in the industry, a position already taken by the Maharlika Investment Corporation. The issue erupted after questions over the GSIS's stake in DigiPlus, which prompted the suspension of President and General Manager Vic Veloso. Economists say it's hypocritical to promote financial literacy while profiting from gambling, and they want a formal ban to protect public funds. With national debt at record levels, the debate over where government money should and shouldn't go is only getting louder. Artificial intelligence could add as much as 1.8 trillion pesos to the Philippine economy. A new report from Google Philippines and consultancy Public First says the boost could come as more Filipinos use AI for work and upskilling. If realized, the 2025 Economic Opportunity Report estimates this would mean a 7% jump in gross value added, potentially lifting the country's global competitiveness and position in the digital economy. Corruption in public works may run far deeper than flood control projects, and a city mayor is speaking out. Baguio City Mayor Benjamin Magalong, in an interview with BNC's On Point, backed Senator Panfilo Lacson's claim that dozens of lawmakers have received kickbacks. He said he's working with Lacson to consolidate evidence on the matter.
Ito yung mga identified talaga na contractors that who won, and before they became members of the House of Representatives, kung na sila, mga contractors na nila, well-known contractors. Pero iba yung naging contractor nung naging congressman. Iba pa yon, no? At ito naman mga congressman na to, ang ginawa nila para hindi halata, yung mga contractors, yung mga asawa nila, yung mga anak nila, kamag-anak nila. Pero behind the scene, yung nagmamando, yung nagmamanage pa rin yung congressman. Natutuwa pa nga yung ibang mga congressman dyan na hindi involved sa flood control, pero involved sila sa ibang mga anomalya tulad ng asphalt overlay, mga road opening, mga bridges, mga cat's eye, mga rock netting, dyan sa solar lights. Napakarami pa. Alam mo, tuwang-tuwa pa sila na pumapalakpak because so far so good, hindi sila napapansin.
Magalong revealed he was personally offered a percentage of a project but turned it down and shelved the plan altogether.
Ang nai-offer sa akin is 10% of the total contract price na 380 million pesos. So nag-offer sila na 38 million. That was about 3 years ago. Meron din yung sa road safety. Alam mo yung yellow barriers? I was offered 6% naman kasi yung funding will be coming from influential politicians upstairs.
The allegations feed into growing calls for systemic reform in infrastructure spending, especially with the country's debt at a record high and investors watching how public funds are being managed. Congress is set to dig into what President Bongbong Marcos himself calls allegedly anomalous flood control projects worth hundreds of billions of pesos. Bicol Saro Party List Representative Terry Redon, who heads the House Committee on Public Accounts, vows to ask tough, direct questions. The probe will start by verifying whether the 15 contractors named by the president actually delivered their project. The Public Works and Good Government committees will join the investigation. Some of the firms on the president's list have been linked to Senate President Chiz Escudero and Ako Bicol Party List Representative Zaldico, adding a high-stakes political edge to the case. With national debt at record levels, lawmakers say they're under pressure to make sure every infrastructure peso is accounted for and spent honestly. President Marcos is backing Public Works and Highway Secretary Manuel Bunoan despite corruption allegations hounding flood control projects. Malacanang says the DPWH won't run the probe, but will hand over all records needed. The investigation will be led by regional project monitoring committees with oversight from the Department of Economy, Planning and Development. Marcos says any official found involved will be named once the facts are in. The message, full trust in his public works chief, but zero tolerance for corruption in billion-peso infra projects. We're taking a quick break. Business 360 will be right back. With 4 months left in 2025, micro, small, and medium enterprises, 99% of businesses, over 60% of jobs face growing pressures. Q2 GDP rose 5.5% on stronger spending, lower inflation, and easier credit. But global risks loom, from the 19% U.S. tariff to a possible 100% duty on semiconductors. At the same time, flood control projects and uncovered budget irregularities and suspiciously similar contracts are putting a spotlight on how corruption and delays in infrastructure impact our competitiveness. Now, joining us now is a top voice in the Philippine business community, Go Negosyo founder, entrepreneurship advocate, and the chairman of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council Philippines, Joey Concepcion. He's here to talk about how the private sector can drive economic growth, strengthen regional trade links, and push for clean, effective, and transparent infrastructure at a time when competitiveness and good governance are under global scrutiny. Hi, Joey. Thank you for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Okay, Joey, 4 months left into the year. Are MSMEs keeping pace with the 5.5% growth in Q2, or is the recovery uneven?
Well, definitely our MSME, especially our micro and small entrepreneurs, are definitely coping. And the economic atmosphere that I see is pretty good under the leadership of President Marcos. And we in Go Negosyo, which has been around for 20 years, we are mounting all over the country mentoring programs, basically which we call the 3M on wheels, which is mentorship, money, and market. The 3Ms are essential tools for MSME, especially micro, to be able to scale up from micro to small, and eventually some of them from small to medium.
Yeah, you've been with MSMEs holding up their hands for over 20 years, Joey. Can you give us a beat on the street currently? Interest rates are down. Credit growth is growing. In this environment, are our MSMEs getting easier access to financing?
Definitely, together with the DTI's program of really providing access to funding. And of course, access to market is equally as important, and access to mentors. So this whole ecosystem has to be supported by the big brothers. Big companies like ourselves, RFM Corporation, Ayala, all of the big companies should really help our micro and small to scale up. And they are doing that with our efforts in Go Negosyo. We have, in an event, for example, on a Saturday, we would have close to 100 plus mentors mentoring our micro and small entrepreneurs. So that's very essential. Access to money is there, but it will not work if there is no access to mentors to guide them on how to scale up. And that's a proven model. We've seen it. We've seen a lot of micro moving up to small, and small moving up to medium. And that the big brothers, the big corporations in this country are really finding ways and means on how to also help them, either to funding, to Go Negosyo, and many other. And that's why the ASEAN, which we will be hosting for the second time. The first time was with President Duterte in 2017. So 2026 will be a big year, because the theme of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council, which is the private sector, will focus on really the theme of prosperity for all.
Yeah, two main things. Financing and the mentorship and education. Going back to the financing part, Joey, looking ahead, the BSP is signaling 2 more rate cuts by the end of the year. How much would this help MSMEs on the financing front?
Well, definitely, as interest rates are going down, it will help the MSMEs. But remember, many of our micro entrepreneurs operate at higher interest levels because, of course, the risk factor. So many of the microfinance institutions would lend at a higher rate to cover for in case of any fallouts in payments. But this is good news, especially as the country's the central bank is lowering down the interest rates. It will help definitely the MSMEs, especially the micro and small. The medium and large, they can very well take care of themselves. But more than access to funding is access to mentors, because they can be funded, but if they're not guided properly, and it will just go to waste.
Absolutely, and we really need the private sector for the education and the mentorship side. Joey, going on to another front, with a 19% tariff already in place and a possible 100% duty on semiconductors, how exposed would you say our MSMEs are to this, either directly, indirectly?
Well, in the semiconductor, the micro entrepreneurs are not in that field. That's really for more big business. We were once in the semiconductor business, so we exported to the United States, etc. It's a huge. I mean, it's a challenging business because you're working and supplying companies overseas, especially in the United States. But the way I look at it, of course, the 19% tariff. I mean, what can we do? I mean, U.S. controls the gate valve, no? And we don't control that. But we have to be able to manage through all of these challenges and be able to continue to propel the economic growth in the Philippines.
Yeah, propel economic growth in other ways. In light of these tariffs, Joey, do you think that we should accelerate our pivot towards ASEAN markets, especially ahead of the Philippines' 2026 hosting of the ASEAN Summit?
Yes, in fact, this afternoon we will be meeting about 8 ASEAN ambassadors in a meeting in preparation for next year. And what's very important is ASEAN is 10 countries, no? And not all of them are in the level of Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia. So the Philippines is definitely, as a host country for next year, will really pound on the importance of ASEAN being more united, 10 countries working as one, not 10 countries moving in different directions. That's why America is very powerful because they have, 48, 49 states. The Philippines and ASEAN, this basically about 10 countries together. So scale is needed for us to be able to bring down our cost. And that's why we have a program that has been launched, the ASEAN Food Security Alliance, which will be a legacy project of the ASEAN back next year. But we have started already as early this year to bring the big brothers of the Philippines in agriculture, meeting up with the big brothers in Malaysia, Myanmar, Indonesia, etc., and then Cambodia, Vietnam. And that collaboration will not beat the level of the 50 states of America, but in other words, you need to have size to bring down your cost. And sharing of talent, sharing of resources, and pulling our efforts together within the 10 ASEAN countries will be able to scale up and be more competitive. And that has been done. We have launched the ASEAN Food Security Alliance early this year.
Yeah, unity is key. So much to gain from collaborating with the ASEAN. Joey, you mentioned that you're going to be meeting with 8 ASEAN ambassadors soon. Can you tell us which ones, and perhaps, if you can, what's on the agenda for that meeting?
Well, the agenda, we have, of course, invited Malaysia, Indonesia, Cambodia. In the ASEAN countries, their ambassadors will be meeting us. In fact, we're holding it at the Hyatt Hotel at 2 p.m. this afternoon. So the basic idea is to share with them, since the Philippines will be hosting. So this is the only international event at this level that President Marcos will be able to experience, hosting the ASEAN, because after this, it will move on to another country. You know? So we really want to make it big for President Marcos and to really come out strong on what his vision is. And unity is key, because through unity, as all ASEAN countries work together in one sector that we would like to see, because many of our big brothers in ASEAN are quite strong in agriculture, in agribusiness. The Philippines is still moving up, but we need to share best practices of each country. And that is the whole effort of this meeting, that next year when we host, we want to make sure that it is not for just show. In other words, we're putting enough time and effort to really plan for a great execution of the ASEAN event in 2026.
Yeah, it's going to be a great springboard for regional cooperation, Joey. On another front, I wanted to ask you about a big issue that is making the headlines, flood control and corruption. The president's probe into flood control projects revealed budget irregularities, suspiciously similar contracts, and unclear project scopes. As a key voice in the private sector, Joey, what do you make of these findings?
Well, I think that is the right approach. I think, needless to say, there is corruption happening in this country. I mean, it's a fact. But the objective is to find ways and means to bring the level of corruption down. I don't believe that we can ever, do this overnight and eradicate corruption, as quick as that. So, I mean, we have to really bring back the values of, having one big heart for our country, and unless that really comes into place, then corruption will continue. But I'm hopeful under this administration, a lot of effort is being done to tame it down and hopefully lessen it. The private sector ourselves are really focused on growth for this country, because without growth, there will be no prosperity for our MSMEs.
Yeah, this was a big move by the president himself to bring it to fore and to actually name names with the actual companies, the 15 companies. Joey, can you describe the current level of corruption in the Philippines right now, second half 2025? How big of a problem, how widespread is this from your perspective?
Well, I'm not so familiar in that space. I know that corruption has existed for so many years now. And the dream is to eradicate it, but let's be practical. That might take a long time. But I think what the government is trying to do is streamline the whole process. Under the administration of President Marcos, he created a private sector advisory council. So this is composed of private sector people like myself, who I lead the jobs committee, that are putting efforts on trying to find ways and means to smoothen the whole process and the government bureaucracy. In the private sector, we are able to corruption because we own the business. We run the business. And in government, of course, people who work for government, they don't have shares of the company they work with. No? So it's a different story in the private sector.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, as the president mounts, his campaign and keeps talking about it, I think it will tame it down.
Absolutely. Speaking of the private sector, infrastructure titan Ramon Ang has a proposal to desilt waterways. It's reviving the conversation for PPPs. Do you think PPPs are the key to addressing corruption while delivering faster and more effective flood control?
Definitely, because let's put it, the private sector is really has the best businessmen on board. No? Why? Because they own the company. Government people, they don't own the company, though we work for the company. So there is a difference there, because it's when you started your company, there is greater passion. Not to say that government employees have no passion at all. There are many of them who have passion. But the private sector, the rewards come back to us through profits, sharing the dividends with our shareholders. So the shareholders of the Philippines are the citizens of the Philippines, of course. No? So if the government does well, the citizens get better opportunities, better roads, infrastructure, and all of that. So it's similar in a sense. But remember, we get a profit bonus, we get dividends, we own the company. But of course, government people, they don't have that because they are basically employees of Philippines Inc. No? So there is a difference. There is, of course, greater motivation as an entrepreneur to scale up. Now, I'm not saying that government people are not motivated. They're also motivated because of if they attain a good job in the, let's say they're a secretary of education or whatever, and they do well, they get it in building their name. No? So hopefully, under the leadership of President Marcos, he will be able to drive our government partners in really trying to achieve the level of prosperity that will help our MSMEs. No?
Yeah, interesting that you mentioned that. The private sector is very invested. They've got the name, they've got the brand, they've got the legacy businesses. Very interesting point, Joey. Last question. What is the single most urgent step you'd like to see this administration take in the second half of the year to boost the competitiveness of the Philippines, especially ahead of the ASEAN, our hosting of the ASEAN Summit in 2026?
Well, I believe that the ASEAN Summit in 2026 will be our battle cry, and this will be I would say, the president will have to leave office when his term ends, so we have to support him succeed in his remaining term, and 2026 will be the best rallying point when we host the ASEAN and when we bring the other countries, and of course the United States and the India and all the other presidents and prime ministers will be coming for the finale in the 2026 in October. So we should make that as our battle cry, that support President Marcos. Let's try to achieve as much as we can by providing greater prosperity for all our people, especially our micro and small entrepreneurs who are struggling out there. No, they have a small business. We need to help them grow, and the private sector, big business, is definitely committed to see it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the goal: greater prosperity for the entire Philippines. Thank you so much, Joey, for everything that you do with the ASEAN and on the MSME front.
Thank you.
We're taking a quick break. Please stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers and the narratives that matter most to your bottom line. Welcome back. Let's check on how Asian markets are performing this Wednesday morning. Looks like the sharp gains in Wall Street overnight are providing a positive backdrop for trading today. The Nikkei 225 is higher by 1.3%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index up by about 1%. Shanghai Composite flat with a slight upward bias, up by about 0.1%. Singapore Straits Times Index up by about 0.9%, almost 1% there. Here at home, Philippine shares snapped out of a three-day slide Tuesday, with bargain hunters lifting the main index back above 62.80. PSE climbed 0.6% to 62.90, with value turnover surging to 13.73 billion pesos on 756.75 million shares traded. Analysts say investors took advantage of recent losses, even as global trade tensions and the U.S.'s plan for a 100% tariff on semiconductors kept sentiment guarded. Special Assistant to the President for Investment, Frederick Go, says the Philippines will lobby for an exemption. Market watchers expect trading to remain sideways to slightly positive over the near term, with support at 62.50 and resistance at 63.50 as investors look for new leads from corporate announcements and this week's U.S. inflation data. Regional markets are also likely to take their cue from the same global headlines, keeping sentiment cautious but opportunity-driven. Checking on the PSE index today, as of 10:39 this morning, the main gauge is in the green and back at the 6,300 level. We're up by 0.2% to 63.03. All shares index up as well, higher by 0.2% to 37.57. As for the sub-indices, we're seeing a mixed picture here. While the market is in the green, its gains are being tempered by losses in the property and services counters. So far, 212 million shares have been traded, valued at 1.24 billion pesos. Market breadth is positive. We've got 80 advancers, 59 decliners, and 43 stocks unchanged. Taking a look at our currency markets, the peso opened stronger at 56.88 to the dollar, up from its previous close of 57.08. On the corporate front, PLDT Incorporated posted stronger profits in the second quarter, signaling resilient demand for connectivity services. In its disclosure, the telco giant reported an attributable net income of 9.11 billion pesos, up more than 6% from a year ago. lifted by higher service revenues. The results come amid rapid digital transformation and increasing policy debates over the future of the telecoms industry, with legislation like the Konektadong Pinoy Bill poised to shape competition, infrastructure investments, and the country's position in the digital economy. Onto another firm, Double Dragon Corporation is tapping the debt market for billions as it lines up funding for growth. In a disclosure, the company said that it will raise up to 10.9 billion pesos through a retail bond offering next month, offering a 7.7% interest rate with maturities of just over 3 and 5 years. The issue forms part of its shelf-registered bond program approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission last year. Double Dragon says the offering received the highest PRS triple, a credit rating from the Philippine Rating Services Corporation, a mark given to firms with a very strong capacity to meet financial commitments compared to other Philippine companies. The move comes as more corporates turn to the local bond market to lock in rates ahead of possible changes in monetary policy. LT Group Incorporated reports higher first-half profits with attributable net income up 17% to 14.97 billion. In a disclosure, Bilyonaryo Lucio Tan's holding company says the gains were driven by its diversified portfolio. Philippine National Bank is the biggest earnings contributor, followed by the tobacco business. Tanduay and Asia Brewery also add to the total, along with Eaton Properties and Victoria's Milling Company. The results show how banking, tobacco, and consumer goods help offset economic headwinds, giving the group a solid start to the year. The Asian Development Bank is backing the Philippines' push to end hunger, approving a $400 million loan to tackle food insecurity and malnutrition. Funding comes as climate change and disaster risks put more pressure on the country's food supply. It will support the government's Zero Hunger Project, which issues e-vouchers to 750,000 food insecure households nationwide. The ADB says the initiative underscores its commitment to improving food security and nutrition, so all Filipinos have the chance to thrive. With global food prices volatile and extreme weather on the rise, the program also signals stronger regional cooperation to build resilient, sustainable food systems. We're taking a short break. Business 360 will be right back. Welcome back. The Philippines and Japan are taking their defense ties to the next level, with a pact allowing joint military drills and troop deployments taking effect September 11th. Foreign Secretary Teresa Lazaro and Japanese Ambassador Endo Kazuya formalized the reciprocal access agreement, which will allow easier entry for troops, equipment, and supplies for joint training and missions. The Japanese embassy says the deal will strengthen defense cooperation and promote peace in the Indo-Pacific amid rising security challenges in the region. With online gambling under scrutiny from pension funds to policymakers, the Department of the Interior and local government is now imposing a total ban on its own people. A new memorandum circular prohibits all DILG personnel and local officials from accessing online gambling platforms, citing the need to protect integrity and public trust in government. The directive expands the existing ban on casino gambling to cover online betting, which the DILG warns poses an even greater risk to public service. Violators face administrative or criminal sanctions. Senate Majority Leader Joel Villanueva praised the move and called for a similar policy across the entire civil service, saying it's key to safeguarding government credibility. The ban comes amid wider calls for a formal prohibition on government links to the gambling industry. This as the country grapples with record national debt and pressure to spend public funds responsibly. A viral video of an SUV dangerously counterflowing on the Skyway prompts action from the Land Transportation Office. Our mobility correspondent, G. Baroga, has the details.
The registered owner of the Hyundai Kona that was caught on camera counterflowing on the Skyway over the weekend appears before the LTO. According to LTO Executive Director Greg Pua, the owner claims he hasn't had the vehicle since July 2021. He even presents documents showing the car is already with the bank.
Ipapa-showcase din namin ng East West Bank kasi sila ang binanggit na pinag-surrenderan nitong may registered owner nung sasakyan.
Pua clarifies that the car wasn't sold, but might have been used as a collateral for a loan that wasn't paid. There's also a chance the bank sold it, but the transfer of ownership wasn't processed.
Ito yung iniiwasan po natin na ini-encourage din natin yung mga nagbenta ng sasakyan na i-report sa LTO or i-process nyo na po yung transfer. Dahil kapag may mga ganitong insidente po, ay kayo ang ipapatawag ng LTO.
As for the owner's liability on the incident, that will depend on East West Bank's explanation. Meanwhile, the driver, identified as Jake Nazareno, did not show up at the preliminary hearing. Because of that, the LTO plans to resolve the case this week based on the evidence already on hand. Prior to this, Transport Chief Vince Dizon has ordered the perpetual revocation of Nazareno's driver's license.
Yung perpetual disqualifications and revocations is on the table sa mga ganitong klaseng violation po. Lalo po nito, napakadelikado po nung ginawa nung driver na ito.
Pua adds that the driver first got his license in 2013, but upon renewal, it's only valid for 5 years, a sign this isn't his first traffic violation. LTO also reminds motorists, every time you start your engine, make it a commitment to drive safely, to drive responsibly, to save lives. For BNC Mobility, G. Baroga.
President Donald Trump is touting his tariffs as a win for the U.S. economy, claiming they're generating trillions without driving up inflation, while taking aim at Goldman Sachs' CEO David Solomon for his downbeat forecasts. U.S. consumer prices rose moderately in July, with higher costs in services and tariff-sensitive goods pushing inflation higher. Economists caution the full impact of tariffs is still coming as businesses sell off inventory purchased before the duties took effect. Amid the economic debate, Trump has nominated Heritage Foundation economist E.J. Antoni to lead the Bureau of Labor Statistics, a move that could signal changes in how the U.S. reports inflation and employment data. The stakes are global, with trade policy, price pressures, and data reliability all under the microscope. For markets, investors, and the United States, partners like the Philippines. Geopolitics is back in focus, with markets watching how an upcoming meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin could impact energy prices, trade flows, and global stability. The White House says it will be a listening exercise for Trump, playing down expectations for a ceasefire deal in the Russia-Ukraine war. The Alaska meeting comes as Trump mulls a future visit to Russia. He has floated the idea that both sides may need to give up territory to end the fighting, a proposal flatly rejected by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Optimistic that a deal will emerge from this meeting, or is he simply going to listen?
I think this is a listening exercise for the president. Look, only one party that's involved in this war is going to be present. And so this is for the president to go and to get, again, a more firm and better understanding of how we can hopefully bring this war to an end.
The outcome could have ripple effects for the Philippines, from oil prices and inflation to the security environment here in Asia. Hundreds of National Guard troops roll into Washington under orders from President Donald Trump to crack down on crime in the U.S. Capitol. Democrats are already pushing back, asking where troops might be sent next. Mayor Muriel Bowser says the Guard will not have arrest powers and will only carry their standard issue firearms. The move is drawing strong reactions from residents, some welcoming the extra security, while others are calling it government overreach.
It's a joke. It's unnecessary. Really unnecessary. I mean, when it comes to the city, you have city crime and as you looked at all the statistics, crime is really down. So it's really unnecessary. It's a kind of a horse and pony show.
Personally, we have clearly a family, and that's been one of the factors of us potentially wanting to move out of the city eventually, is just the nature of the city and the crime rate. I know that it has gone down, but it's still very much a active fear in our life is navigating this area with our kids. So I'm hopeful that it will make a difference, but I don't really know much about it.
Immigrant advocates in Los Angeles rally at MacArthur Park backing a 24-hour community stoppage to protest ongoing ICE raids. Speakers urged residents to use their purchasing power, boycotting stores like Home Depot, where ICE operations have been most active. They also called for an end to military occupation and any local law enforcement cooperation with immigration authorities.
I have family members who are car washers, and it's honestly having family members, friends, being in that community, it's terrifying, not to know if your family members are going to come back home, or you're going to see them. They're just trying to go to work and go back home, so that's why it's important.
And that's it for Business 360. I'm Maiki Oreta. Thank you for joining us, and keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.